let me know. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Daniela, and we're here with
LaConni Mitchell.
Yvette Burton.
Tanisha Rivers.
and we're here to interview them about their life growing up in Texas and going to a HBCU and having the struggles of being African American and being a woman. So let's start off with LaConni.
Okay, again, my name is LaConni Mitchell. I am a native Houstonian. I am a graduate of Texas Southern University.
Go ahead.
I'm Yvette Burton, a graduate of Xavier University of New Orleans. I also took classes and some semester classes and summer classes at Texas Southern University, a native Houstonian, third ward resident for over 50 years.
Again, my name is Tanisha Rivers. I'm 38. I did not attend a HBCU, but I did attend Lamar University in Beaumont, and I am a native of Texas.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna open up the floor with some questions. Y'all can input your stories. Whoever wants to go first. How was it growing up in Texas?
I found growing up in Texas to be quite rewarding. I was born in 1965, spent my entire life here in Houston, educated here in the city of Houston, public school system, again in Texas Southern University. I had a very good childhood. Of course, at the time that I was born, the city was still a little segregated. African American people lived in certain parts of the city, and we went to our local schools in the areas, which were predominantly African American. But otherwise, I had a great childhood growing up in the city of Houston.
Okay. Growing up in the city of Houston in the 1960s and the 70s was quite interesting, very rewarding. I also attended Houston public schools. I went to neighborhood schools, and in high school, because of the minority to majority transfer program, I did attend Lamar High School. After that, I chose to once again go to a historically black college.
And I grew up in Woodville, Texas, which is a very small country town. I attended the only school that was there, that was locally for different small country towns there. So as far as facing discrimination, I didn't really notice it because I think my family kind of shielded us from it, so we didn't really get to see it as much.
All right, thank you. Talking about discrimination, did you have any big stories that y'all faced when y'all were growing up or anything about discrimination you want to talk about? Or one of your family members that faced anything?
Well, I was quite young, but I do remember this story. My mother is surprised that I remember this story. I guess it stayed with me so long because I really didn't understand at the time what it meant until I got a little bit older. It was probably in 1972. I had my first trip to downtown Houston. We rode the city bus, and for me it was like a field trip. My mother was taking me on because I had never actually ventured outside of the neighborhood. So when we were growing up, you did everything in your neighborhood, your local stores and everything was in your neighborhood. So my mother and I had taken the Q-Tran bus, it was called at that time, downtown. And we were walking by, and I saw something in a store window that I felt like I just really had to have. And it was an ice cream cone. And so I told my mother, I want an ice cream cone. And so we walked into the store, and I later found out that it was an F.W. Woolworth store. My mother walked up to the counter, and she said, I'd like to have one ice cream cone. And the store attendant said to her, we don't serve colors from the counter. And as a little girl, I kind of tugged on my mother's skirt and I said, I don't want the chocolate one, I want the vanilla one, because I'm thinking when you talk color, there's something with color in it. I didn't understand that I was a person of color at that time. So she said, well, ma'am, I just want one ice cream cone for my little girl. And she told her, again, we do not serve colors from the counter. So what she did was she instructed us to go out of the store, go around the back, and she said, I can serve you from the back door. Otherwise, you cannot get an ice cream cone. So my mother left the store, and when we went out of the store, of course, as a child, I was disturbed because all I really thought was important was to get that ice cream cone, and I didn't understand why I could not get the ice cream cone. So my mother told me this story about, appreciating who you are and not letting people, treat you any differently because you look differently. But again, the only thing I wanted was the ice cream cone. So it wasn't until I was old enough to understand that there was a difference that I didn't know I could get this ice cream cone. So then I said, well, now I understand I was discriminated against because I was a young black child. And my mother, a black woman, who also attended Texas Southern, I'll add, could not be served from a counter just to get a kid an ice cream cone.
Wow, that's crazy.
I do not recall directly being discriminated against. My father is a retired dentist in the area. He was the third African American to graduate from the University of Texas Dental Branch here in Houston. When we talk about the things that he experienced by being one of maybe 4 or 5 African Americans in this school at the time, there was a lot of discrimination going on. When I was young, he did not share those stories with me because, of course, you want to protect your children. But his greatest motivation at the school seemed to be at the time that one of his professors told him that he would never finish dental school. Well, with that in mind, that motivated him even further. And he has practiced here in the city of Houston for over 50 years in a low-income area in the Acres Home area. I also have an older sister who's only 5 years older than me. And my parents had to explain to her, just as Ms. Mitchell said, why she could not eat at the counter in the Woolworth store. 5 years older than me, and she experienced that. So that lets me know that discrimination is not very far removed from my time. I am also a proud member of the Antioch Baptist Church, downtown Houston, historical church, founded by African American former slaves. A lot of the history is still retained in that church. We have a lot of documentation on the actual discrimination that went on during that time period. But as I work there in that church, I find a great strength of a sense of pride in what we as a people went through to go in there every Sunday and sometimes even during the week and to sit on pews that African Americans made. Gives you a very strong sense of pride in that. And if you can build a church, a place of worship, honoring a God that can bring you through discrimination, civil rights, even brought us through slavery, that's a very great sense of pride there. Discrimination, I think, still exists. It's just in a different form now. Yeah. And unfortunately, we don't always realize that it's there. But it does still exist, even today.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, as I said, I think my family sort of shielded us from a lot of discrimination growing up, but I know my grandfather, who could not read or write, we didn't know this until he had passed away and we were in high school, that he could never read or write. And I think a lot of, for him, I didn't come from, my family didn't come from educated backgrounds as these two ladies, but he was a very strong-willed man. And I think because he didn't know how to read or write, he made himself stronger by ways of the way he thought and the way he allowed people to treat him. And a lot of that he instilled in his grandkids. Not as much as his kids, but definitely in his grandkids. So I guess we don't really, sometimes that you are discriminated against, but you may not notice it because I consider myself to be a very strong person. So I don't know if I could just sit around and allow myself to be discriminated against without voicing my opinion, but I don't really know because I wasn't as far back in the time as these ladies speak of, but I don't think I haven't personally experienced it as far as in the state of Texas. I am a military veteran, so I did experience a bit of it in the military, whereas you're kind of stereotyped as an African American female that you may have certain qualms about yourself as far as your attitude or things like that. So you have to work harder to overcome that so that people can respect you for who you are as an individual. So in that way, I guess you can say that was a sort of discrimination that I had to work towards to be able to allow people to see me as an individual and not as a person of color, just not see color or, a gender. So I guess that was a little bit of discrimination that I did face, but that was in the military.
Kind of like a double minority.
Yes. So it's very hard to for people to see you outside of that because of the stereotype that they have on African American women.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those stories. I know they're personal and sometimes hard to tell, but thank y'all for sharing. Now I want to ask y'all about TSU, or what do y'all think about HBCUs, and what is the importance of attending an HBCU and keeping them alive still?
Well, of course, I am a graduate of Texas Southern University, a proud Tiger. It is KTSU every Friday. And Sundays, absolutely, and Sundays. And so, I mean, I think it was very important, and it still is very important that historical Black colleges are available to students. Oftentimes, there are students who are not necessarily prepared to go to college. And so I think that, not that HBCUs are inferior to other schools, but I think that oftentimes there are smaller classes, and people and instructors who can spend more time with students to prepare them to, for higher education. Oftentimes students can afford to go to larger schools, and so HBCUs tend to be a little more affordable for students to attend. And it's just a good thing to keep history, alive, and so that people can understand, like, some of the struggles that your dad had going to school, and some of the struggles that you may have had even in the military. That things are available for people to learn more, do better, and to excel in life. So, again, I'm not opposed to larger schools. I'm not opposed to schools that are not historically Black colleges. But I think that because those schools are accessible and people have the opportunity to further their education.
Yeah.
I think historically Black colleges and universities are very, very, very needed in society or in the world at this time. It gives you a sense of bonding, a sense of belonging. These are people that are like me, that most people are more comfortable being with people that look like you. I know, at least I am. Not that I'm uncomfortable with other people, but I know this person understands the struggles, the situations that I've had to endure simply by being an African American. Other races may say they understand, they know how you feel, but if you have not walked in those shoes, no, you do not necessarily know, you're only imagining. It was a very sense of real family. And it's also important that it's getting to the point now where schools are changing African American history to make it politically correct. They're not teaching it even in some situations. So it's also important that we keep them so that we can go back and our children can know our history. If you don't necessarily know where you're coming from, where you've been, then you certainly can't have a clear path as to where you're going. So, and it also provides a lot of students that may be not able to afford the larger schools' tuition. You have smaller classes. That is very necessary in some for some students in their environment. But just you get a real sense of people that care, and you're just not a number to that school, number 150 or whatever. But you have a name, you have a purpose, you have people that are behind you and that are really pushing you. And when they say they understand, then yes, they really do understand.
Thank you. I know you didn't go to a HBCU, but why didn't you, if you want to answer, or did you even think about it, or?
I don't think I ever thought about it. I just applied to a school that was close to where I live, which was in Beaumont, and then, I was accepted to that school, and then I, attended that school. That was after I joined the military and got out of the military, so I didn't go straight from high school. I joined the military and then I went to school. So I don't think I ever thought about it. There wasn't a reason why I didn't choose one. It just wasn't a thought.
All right, and I know you mentioned your mom went to the TSU. Were there any like significant stories that she told you?
Yeah, I can remember her telling stories about, because at that time, students were protesting and against everything, including the Vietnam War, everything. And so I can remember her telling me stories about when the dogs, were brought to the campus and firefighters and police officers and water hoses were being, sprayed on students. For her specifically, she was there on the campus at that time, but, she never was arrested or was sprayed with water or with a fire hose, but she was actually on campus and witnessed some of these things. So, she said that, the times were, it was a huge struggle and times were hard and difficult for people trying to get just rights just for being a human being that they were not being afforded. And so for her, it was a great opportunity to say, well, there is a college that I can go to, so, she's a tiger.
But I think that's important, as I said, to know the history. I never knew that happened in TSU.
Yeah.
You only see really the one picture in Alabama where the dogs were let loose and the firefighters were coming with the hoses. So it's important that we have that history, that we know that actually happened here in Houston at an African American school. And that's another example of why I think we need to keep them. We've got to have that history.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like they're trying to change the history books and say they weren't slaves, they were workers.
Right.
And type like that, like we need to keep it alive so they know that this actually did happen.
One thing I just thought about, my mother has a first cousin that went to the University of Texas, and she wanted to be an opera singer. Well, you just didn't have African American opera singers, but she was cast to play, I don't remember what role it was, but it was a big role, big production, and they pulled her out about 3 days before because the alumni that were basically supporting the school were saying that if an African American has this role equivalent to a white male counterpart, that they would stop their donations that they were giving to the school. And they actually did pull her out. Her name is Barbara Conrad. She has performed now several times, even at the White House. But she still tells us those stories about how she felt. She was one of those that was able to bounce back from that. She received offers from a lot of people. Sidney Poitier was one who said, I'm paying college tuition wherever it is that you want to go to school. But that was real, that was very real, one generation before me, and they actually pulled her out.